everyone, and welcome to our interview today with one of your favourite authors here in North Queensland, and he's also a personal development coach. My name is Patricia Ryan, and I run the Communication Skills Consultancy. Our author today is a man of many talents, I think, because he not only writes numerous books on how to have a better life, but he writes plays on them as well. So I'm hoping that he'll touch on some of these things this afternoon. As a personal coach, he takes organisations large and small, as well as people privately, on how to improve their life success outcomes. I would like you all to meet Stephen Chong.
Hello Patricia, thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to have you here. Stephen, one of the things I encounter a lot within my own consultancy is the challenges people face every day with respect to effective communication, both in their personal relationships but also their workplace.
Yes.
Can you offer some insights that might be a benefit to you?
Isn't it interesting, Patricia? I mean, effective communication forms a part of the pillar of having great relationships, which is a part of the pillar of happiness. When we have dysfunctional relationships, our life becomes more difficult. So effective communication is an absolute, premium part of that pillar. Yes.
Can you give us some samples or examples of how this actually physically works in the workplace?
Yeah, well, let me give you an example. Actually, one that comes to mind. A friend of mine who's become a friend, a mentor. He is the CEO of a very large engineering firm. Now, as a communicator, he was a great engineer, to get my meaning. Yeah. And he was presiding over quite a dysfunctional workplace. Now, in working with him, what we decided to do was not so much to improve his communication skills. They are what they are. But what we did was help him construct within the workplace effective forums, mediums where effective communication could occur, where he could enable his staff to express creative ideas and also, of course, discuss any workplace issues. But at last count, he was doing very well. So we didn't have to change his style so much, rather is you create opportunities for effective communication to occur. And for him, it's worked very well.
Now, can we kind of qualify that for our viewers as to what actual things or methods they could use to bring that about?
Yes, in a workplace, in his workplace context, what we did was establish effective meetings on a regular basis, toolbox talks, where he facilitated communication rather than oversaw or conducted. So he was able to bring out the best in his people through those communication forums. Now his style...
may not suit everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Lovely man. I love him to death.
Yeah.
But he's not for everybody. He's an engineer. He thinks logically. They got wheels that are different.
Like accountants.
Yeah. But it took a few months, but as it's turned out now, he's, I believe, at last count, one of the high-end producers of his rather large organisation, and his workplace has turned very much away from the dysfunction. So credit to him, he did the work.
So the principles you use there, would that work for a company that had a different leadership? What principles could you pass on to people?
Horses for courses, I must say. In his case, we decided, to create these communication forums. In other cases, it might require one-on-one improvements with individuals. Example, I worked with a gentleman, again, CEO of an organisation, who was rather abrasive, shall we say. So we have to, again, each to their own, no judgments made, but we had to tone down his level of aggression, shall we say. But each to their own, we have to work with the individual that sits in front of us.
What about on a personal level? How about in families?
Oh, isn't it interesting?
You've written a book on parenting, so
I
have to ask that question.
I wrote about this in The Power of the Possible
That's
just
right,
recently,
yes.
and it must say it drives me mad. You see families when they sit in like around a dining table or in a restaurant, and the TV's on, and they've all got their mobiles out, and they're, I don't know, Facebooking or whatever they're doing. They're not communicating. See, it's the same, to me it's the same principle. Around the dining table is a perfect environment where effective communication can occur, isn't it? Where you can sit and look a person in the eye, turn the TV off, mobiles somewhere else, and say, what do you think? We've got an issue over here, what's your opinion? Great for it. Doesn't mean you have to be a great communicator, it means you have to create opportunities for effective communication to occur.
I like the idea of that, creating opportunities, because everybody knows we need to learn to listen. People think listening comes naturally, and it doesn't. You have to learn to do it. So what opportunities would there be that you could just say, look, try that.
Well, the dining table is the first one, in my opinion. The second one, is the car.
Oh, of course.
Now, we drive our kids around, well, at least I used to, until they got their licence.
Yeah.
But
we don't
they're captive audience, aren't they? And again, it's not a place where you tell or dictate to them, it's a place where you ask.
Yes.
They're sitting in the car with you, there's nothing else for them to do. Ask them a question. What do you think about such and such? What do we want to do about that?
Yes, because we have to be careful that we don't get parents interrogating them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what did you do today? Who did you meet? What did you say? So how do they get rid of that? Just by asking, what do you think?
Yeah, well, and authenticity from a parent's point of view. I think if I've got an issue, and the way I see it in my head is that it's levels of importance. Now, if we've got big decisions to make in a family, I'll do that with my wife, in consultation, of course. But if there are other lower level issues or problems that can be discussed, and I want their opinion, I want teenagers' opinion on how we can improve. So I'll ask them, what do you think about such and such? I want to know.
So parents, I think you should take that on board. That is really...
Well, it works. It's not
really
rocket science, but it does work. One of the other things I did with my three boys is, well, I won't say regularly, but probably once a fortnight or so, we'd go down to a coffee shop, and we just have, I call it dad time, but it's a forum that I created that enables effective communication to occur between we and the family.
Do you know, Stephen, I did the same with my three children.
Beautiful.
We used to go out once a month, at least, if not once, every Friday night we went down to a local cafe and we all talked about the week and what we thought. So that's a wonderful thing.
Beautiful,
and I think, parents should, really take that on board because it's so important. Now, before we did this interview, you were telling me about 6 R's principle. I think the 6 R's principle is something that we really need to know about.
Oh, it's interesting. Particularly, I call it the pirate model. It's a pirate model because it's got all these R's in it. So, excuse me. But it's, when you have these points of agitation in relationships that you have to deal with. They're all
tidy, one's messy.
Yeah. Let me give you an example. Laundry on the bathroom floor. Don't you hate that? Your partner's left these pile of clothes on the bathroom. You walk in the bathroom and you go, oh, that really makes me mad. It makes me cross. And it does. Well, your emotive reaction is telling you that that issue is important to you. Now, what part of this pirate model is not to repress that feeling. Because if we repress it and go, when they do that again, I'm really going to give them a piece of my mind. And from then on, you're looking for them to do that same event so that you can give them a piece of your mind. But what you're actually doing is building a scoreboard with this school. If you do that again, I'm going to get cross at you, I'm going to get mad at you. Scoreboard, and it ticks up until it comes out as, the poor person has left their clothes, and then you go, whoa, hang on. What one does in that case is repress the emotion. You've felt cross about that issue, you need to, rather than repress it, because if you repress too much, it builds to resentment. Too much resentment builds to rejection. I hate you, I don't like you anymore, I'll see you later. So you need to deal with that by determining that issue is important to you. Deal with it, open it up for discussion. It could be something like, when you leave your dirty clothes on the floor like that, it makes me feel cross because I have extra work to do. Would you mind putting it in the laundry for me? Thank you. So it doesn't get repressed, it gets discussed and opened up, not in an aggressive, fisticuffs type manner. Rather, it just gets discussed openly.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. I still haven't heard the 6 R's. What are the 6?
Unreserved acceptance, no scoreboard.
1.
Breeds a reaction. So, and then you come down to this repression, resentment, reaction.
Oh, that's your 6 R's.
Just 6 R's.
So we can hear the 6 R's.
Yeah.
They were just hidden away there.
Yeah.
I think we're probably out of time. Are we out of time yet?
I don't think so.
If we aren't out of time, well, I want to know, in other words, being assertive is not necessarily being pushy or angry. Would you like to fill that out for us?
That's interesting. Let me couch through this prism for you. Aggressive behaviour comes to us in 3 forms. It can be direct, in your face, overbearing, yelling, screaming. It can be indirect, aside. It's what I call the water cooler discussion. So you don't discuss the issue with the person directly. You discuss it with a third party, and that's indirect aggression, or sarcasm, or that sort of stuff. Or it can be passive aggression. Poor me. Why
I'm a victim.
So when we see those, when people behave in that manner, we can identify it as aggressive behaviour. But for me, it's important to develop, and this requires practice, doesn't it? You can't just click your fingers. You develop assertive behaviour. So even when you have the tummy rumples, the butterflies are going, you can stand up and speak your truth in the face of another person's, maybe their tantrum or their poor me. It's always, you stand true within your own knowledge that you're a lovely person. But I have to speak, I have to talk about this issue, but it's not done in an aggressive manner, but it's done assertively rather than aggressively.
And do you work in organisations with this 6 R's principle as well?
Oh yes. And therein lies the issue, coming back to the forums that you create. These forums can be operational, of course, as many organisations do, but they can also be creative, and they could also be to discuss issues of importance, conflict issues. But important for the facilitator, the CEO, whoever it might be is facilitating these meetings, is to set the parameters of how these discussions occur. So if somebody wants to get heated and yell and scream, not in this place. It doesn't happen like that. You want to discuss something, it comes out. You're talking to another.
You make some ground rules before you start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing that interests me very much is the writings that you do. I've read them all, I think, except the parenting one. I didn't need to do the parenting one. I didn't think so. But Letters Across Time, could you tell me a little bit why you wrote that one?
It's like
I loved it.
Your books are like your children, aren't they, Patricia?
Yes.
You never have favourites, but that one's my favourite.
Oh, mine too, so there you go.
When I wrote that, it was like I had no plan or structure of how the story was going to evolve. It just did. I just opened myself up to the universe, to what was going to pour through. And it turns out that some of the information about grief and family issues, of heart-wrenching issues, come out in story form. And I would read it at the end after penning a chapter or two and go, oh, where did that come from? Thanks to the universe for providing. So it is kind of my favourite book, yeah.
And which ones have you made into, is it screenplays?
Yes. Yeah,
Tell me
well,
about
both of The Music of the Soul and Letters Across Time, I've taken the narrative story and turned it into film screenplays, along with the other one, The Power and the Possible, is also.
And where might we be able to view them?
Ah, well, that's another step. Well, the film screenplays, of course, have to be marketed
Right.
and picked up by producers, but that's a work in progress.
Absolutely.
So we'll see how that goes.
Amazing. What a list of talents you have, though. Do you have a favourite talent? Or do you enjoy having a blend?
I'm very open. When I write without expectations, both in novels and the screenplays. I don't go in there with preconceived ideas. I allow the universe to speak
For you.
through
To you.
whatever's there. I would have a topic in mind. For example, I would start writing, talk about love or family relationships or something. So that's the topic I have in my mind, and then I would sit and just
Let it come.
let it come. Yeah, so it's not a thinking process; it's a listening process. I would get a picture in my mind and go, oh, okay. But then I would just listen to the dialogue and out it comes.
Fantastic. I'm glad you shared that with us because it shows us a personal side of you. I now need to know, though, as a personal success coach, you take that privately?
Oh, yes.
And you have a system of approaches you use, or do you wait till see the client and then work out what they need?
Yes, that's very much the way it works.
Tell us about that, because obviously,
Well, again, I'll give you an example of a recent gentleman, a CEO of a large organisation here in Cairns, and we sat over a cup of tea and we discussed issues he was confronted with, and as a consequence of his needs, I was able to design a series of, I think, half a dozen workshops, we call them interventions, whatever, where we were able to work with him, things like communication, things like envisaging, grabbing a hold of your dream and establishing goals and those sorts of things. HR stuff we did a bit of work with, so it was very much based on his needs. I don't do kind of prescriptive things anymore. I don't like that.
No, that's right. That's right. We have finished our time for Stephen's interview, but what a marvellous, marvellous man he is, that he does so many things and helps so many people. Stephen, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.